The influence of European philosophy on the manga by Kentaro Miura Berserk, as well as on its film adaptations, is obvious. The characters speak in paraphrases of famous quotes. Many characters and images embody popular concepts of Western thinkers, and questions about fate, predestination, and free will run through history as a leitmotif, which is especially emphasized in the 1997 anime series. There are many articles and videos on the internet devoted to the philosophical background of the cult manga. That's why it's quite difficult to say something new here and at the same time worthy of any attention. However, due to the special love of the author of this video for the Berserker universe in general and the anime series in particular, it was difficult to try not to make some kind of video on this topic. To this end, we have taken up the translation, or rather even the adaptation, of a couple of videos from the Anime Philosophy channel, which are of special subjective interest to the author, which we hope the audience will share. Enjoy your viewing. An important role for the philosophical exploration of the Berserker universe is represented by a character whose canonicity is not completely confirmed, but which says a lot about the essence of the whole work and which helps to better understand the whole idea of Miura. We're talking about the so-called idea of evil, which is present in only 2 chapters of the manga, but which tells us a lot about this world. The idea of evil is a being or entity that exists only in an ideal world, a non-godlike god, the god of the abyss. It is her servants who are the members of the Lord's hand. But the idea of evil is not God, as is often the case, who created people, but God created by people. The idea was born from the collective subconscious of all mankind, the darkness that lives in the soul of every human being. People did not want suffering to be meaningless in pain, and the idea of evil appeared, weaving human destinies and giving meaning to evil. The idea of evil is fully revealed to the reader only in one so-called lost chapter, where it appears to Griffith and explains its nature. Explains that she is a product of humanity's collective consciousness, and that she is now determining its fate. People were looking for reasons for their sufferings. They wanted to give them meaning, which resulted in the appearance of the god of the abyss, the idea of evil. God is not as a being residing in our world, but as a philosophical idea. Now this god gives meaning to human suffering, directs their destinies, including Griffith's fate. And according to the idea of evil, Griffith's destiny is for him to continue following his will. And here a rather important detail about the structure of the Berserker world is revealed. The idea of evil exists to solve the dichotomy between free will and universal predestination, the existence of fate. The idea of evil affects the circumstances in which people exist, forcing them to act in accordance with the idea of the god of the abyss. An article in the English language wiki on Berserk says that the idea of evil is a perverted version of Plato's theory of ideas, or the theory of eidos. Plato's eidos idea is understood as the main essence of a phenomenon or thing, characterizing its uniqueness, and, moreover, it is a standard, the best example. These ideal images of things exist in a special ideal world, from where people get these ideas, recall them. For example, there are a huge number of different swords in the world, differing in material, color, shape, and size, but they all have something in common that corresponds to the idea of a sword. There is indeed something in common between this concept and the idea of evil from Berserk. The god of the abyss is the ideal image of evil residing in a world different from ours. But you can find philosophers whose thoughts are more similar to Miura's idea. Plato did not think that we are the creators of ideas. It's more about the fact that we can find them, remember them, reasoning rationally. We can turn to another important ancient Greek philosopher before the Socratic era, Democritus, the laughing philosopher. Democritus is primarily known as the creator of the doctrine of atoms, but he is also known as one of the first documented atheists in history. At least, he didn't believe in gods or in God in the conventional sense. Democritus believed that people invent their own gods or God to explain things they don't understand, such as natural phenomena or death or suffering. But Democritus, as was customary among the ancient Greeks, spoke of God rather as a living being who is quite localized in space, for example on Olympus, while the idea of evil is something transcendent, something immaterial and not physical. Probably the most appropriate idea of Miura will be the philosophy of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel is actually still an anime. Hegel is primarily known as a philosopher who influenced Karl Marx with his dialectic, but more broadly, it is only part of a large philosophical system, a teleological concept describing all the devices of being, both mind and matter. Consider Hegel's concept of God, which in his philosophy is called the absolute spirit. Rather, God is one of the manifestations of the absolute spirit. In Hegel, God is not an omnipotent being. Rather, it is not really a being at all, since such a definition would suggest that it is something limited. A boundless, infinite, omnipotent God cannot be a being, cannot be a thing, cannot be an animal or a human being, since such a being can only be defined next to other beings without taking their place. Rather, God is the highest point in the development of all existence, the process of self-knowledge through matter, including through people who in the course of their activities, including mental ones, comprehend this God, who, ultimately, is the most complete form of reality. Hegel also paid a lot of attention to the issues of free will. Hegel believed that your actions cannot be completely free until you realize why you are taking these actions. Once you realize that your actions are not so much conditioned by your own decision as by the conditions around you, as Hegel would say, you become more real than you were before. Such a person becomes closer to God, to the embodiment of the absolute spirit. I hope it's not too stuffy. This concept has a lot in common with the idea of evil. Just as the process of divine self-determination is reflected and developed in every human being and humanity as a whole, so is the idea of evil. Evil itself is reflected in every human being weaving his fate. Of course, it is impossible to say with complete certainty that it was Hegel who had a decisive influence on mangaka when writing Berserk. But at least we can pay attention to how ideas similar to Miura's idea appeared and developed in intellectual history. However, there's a philosopher whose influence on the Berserker universe is almost indisputable. We're talking about Friedrich Nietzsche, who is almost directly quoted in the manga. In chapter 235, Shirke, plunging into the astral dimension, recalls the words of his mentor Flora, who said, "If the Force Summoner cannot control it, it can consume him." Don't forget, when you look into the darkness is looking at you. This quote is a reference to Nietzsche's famous aphorism from his book Beyond Good and Evil. Whoever fights monsters should be careful not to become a monster himself. And if you stare into the abyss for a long time, then the abyss also looks into you. Throughout the story, this idea resonates strongly with the fate of the main character, Gats. Throughout the story, different characters keep noticing that Gats is so much in the fight against monsters that in the process of this struggle, he himself becomes like monsters. Full of hatred for Griffith, searching for the apostles he aims to kill, he goes through a difficult path of brutal and bloody struggle, during which anger and rage fill the heart of Gats even more. Disguising himself in berserker armor, hiding his human form, Gats begins to fight more like a beast than a human. The Skull Knight even warned him that if Gats couldn't control his anger, he would completely lose himself, and his inner monster would triumph. Gats will become like Griffith. Griffith himself is of great interest for Nietzschean consideration. He, like Nietzsche, divides all people into two categories, superior people and the herd. For higher people, unlike the herd, it is important to achieve the lofty goals set for themselves, to leave a mark that will be visible for a long time after their death. And Griffith corresponds to this idea of a superior person. He has a dream that guides all his actions, the dream of getting his own kingdom, in pursuit of which he spends the entire Golden Age story arc. One of the members of the Falcon Squad, Judo, points out to Gats that Griffith is not like them, like ordinary people. The warriors of the squad admire him, believe that if they stay with him, they will have a special fate. Griffith believes in something more than just martial art. knows about something that other ordinary people have no idea about. Just as the members of the squad sincerely do not understand Griffith, so the herd sincerely does not understand the Supreme Man. In Nietzsche's work, The Will to Power, these ideas develop further. Here we're talking about the loneliness inherent in higher people, about their inability to take their place among the herd. Griffith also talks about true friendship, saying that he can consider someone his friend only if that person is Griffith's equal and has his own dream. Griffith cannot consider as his friend someone who clings to the dream of another. One of the ways, according to Nietzsche, that the herd terrified the higher people was to establish religion. Nietzsche was an anti-religious, especially anti-Catholic thinker. He believed that Christianity was established by those who were too weak to fight for what they really wanted, in order to demonize what they could not possess, but what was available to those who were stronger than them, such as wealth, sex, or power. Weak people have established their own form of morality, contrary to the morality of superior people. Nietzsche called this kind of morality slave morality. Nietzsche argued that slave morality asserts as evil everything that superior people regard as good. For example, the opportunity for higher people to take revenge on their abusers with impunity. Griffith does this to General Julius when he orders Gats to kill him for the intrigues that the noblemen began to plot against Griffith. The herd prefers forgiveness to revenge, which is a more convenient kind of morality for weak people. Religion in the world of the Berserker is represented by the so-called cult of the Holy See. It is a monotheistic religion with many hints of Christianity, whose symbol is a hawk crucified on a cross. The members of this cult cling to their faith because they have nothing else to live for. In this world filled with despair, plague, and hunger, people need something to help them overcome their fears. Therefore, they turn to the Holy See to make the world around them a less creepy place. Nietzsche was sure that this was one of the reasons why people created religions, to escape from the fear that haunted them. The path that the Gats has been following throughout history, the path of its growth and change, is the path of self-determination. In his most famous work, Thus Spake Zarathustra, Nietzsche examines the topic of self-determination particularly closely. In it, Zarathustra tells people that in order for them to develop and grow above themselves, they must be able to overcome themselves, which happens in several stages. A person needs to go through 3 metamorphoses. Zarathustra said that man is born a camel, an obedient beast of burden. In this state, a person unquestioningly follows orders given to him by other people, doing what he is told. A person does not look for reasons for his actions, does not criticize the norms and values that fill his life. Gats is also engaged in mercenary activities at the beginning of the Golden Age arc, brandishing a sword, completely not thinking about why he is doing this. What is the point in this? But everything starts to change after Gats meets Griffith. He begins to reflect, looking for meaning in his actions, looking for a purpose in life. At this point, Gats transforms from a camel into a lion. For Nietzsche, the lion is the second stage of human metamorphosis, which Zarathustra speaks about. Leo understands that he does not need to blindly follow others. He is freed from social and internal constraints. The lion tries to find his own purpose in life and define his own values. But before he does, the lion, according to Zarathustra, must defeat the dragon. The dragon acts as a symbol of social relations that suppress people who say what a person should do. Before reaching the final stage of his metamorphosis, a person must determine what he really wants, separate it from what is imposed on him from the outside. Why does Gats want to take revenge on Griffith? Is it really up to him to protect the helmet? When this dragon is finally destroyed, when a person finally understands what he really wants, he can finally overcome himself and go through the last stage of the Nietzschean metamorphosis. Turn from a lion into a child. The child is what Nietzsche called the final form of this process of self-determination. Having found out what a person really wants, he, like a child, can start all over again and create his own meaning. Man is no longer in search of approval. He is no longer fighting for the dragon. He's in control of his reality now.